used to volunteer at a crisis hotline back in college. It was one of those late-night shifts, midnight to 4 a.m., where most of the calls were people just needing someone to talk to. Lonely folks, insomniacs. Sometimes people with more serious issues, but rarely anything I couldn't handle. It gave me a strange sense of peace, helping others while the world slept. That night started off like any other. I was sitting in the tiny office, sipping lukewarm coffee, scrolling through some notes when the phone rang. It was exactly 2:17 a.m. I remember the time because the clock ticked loud in that room when everything else was quiet. I picked up and said the standard line, "Thank you for calling the night line. This is Lisa. What's on your mind tonight?" There was silence at first. Not the hesitant kind either, it was deliberate, like someone wanted me to hear the quiet. I waited, kept my tone calm, gentle, welcoming. Finally, a voice, young, male, spoke. He said, "I don't know where I am." That got my attention. I sat up straighter. "Are you hurt? Can you describe your surroundings?" More silence. Then he said, "It's dark. I can't see anything, but I think someone brought me here." His voice was trembling, whisper quiet, like he was trying not to be heard. I asked his name, but he either didn't hear me or ignored it. "I woke up in this room. No windows. The floor is cold. Concrete, I think. There's a door, but it's locked." A cold feeling started to settle in my chest. This didn't sound like someone going through a hallucination or an emotional crisis. It sounded real. I asked again for his name, told him we could get help to him, but I needed more information. He said, "I think there's a camera in here." I asked if he could describe it. He said it was in the corner of the ceiling, a red light blinking, watching him. "Someone comes in," he said. "They leave food. They never speak." I asked how long he'd been there. "I don't know," he whispered. "Days, maybe weeks. There's no light except when they come. I try not to sleep. I hear things when I sleep." My mind raced. Was this a prank? A delusion? But he didn't sound detached from reality. He sounded terrified. I tried asking for more details, anything that could help pinpoint where he was. Smells, sounds, anything. All he could say was that it smelled like mold and rust, and sometimes he heard what sounded like a generator kicking on and off. Then he paused and said something that still haunts me. "I think they're making me forget." I asked him what he meant. "They give me something in the food. I only remember some things after I eat. Then they're blurry again." I didn't know what to say. I started writing everything down, making a report to escalate. We weren't law enforcement, but we had procedures. I told him to stay on the line, but right then, he stopped talking. I thought he hung up, but I still heard breathing. Then a new voice came through. Not the boy, a man, calm, deep. "He shouldn't be talking to you." And then the line cut out. I sat there, frozen, heart pounding. I called it in, of course, gave every detail. Police got involved. They traced the call, but it came from a disposable phone. The location, an abandoned industrial park about 40 miles out of town. Cops went there, found signs that someone had been living there. Old food containers, a cot, some syringes, but no people, no boy. After that night, I didn't sleep well for weeks. I kept waiting for another call, hoping I'd hear his voice again. But he never called back. I left the hotline a few months later. It stopped feeling peaceful after that. I tried to move on, but I kept thinking about that red light he saw. The blinking one in the corner. The watching one. About a year later, I was house-sitting for a friend. She lived alone in a small house outside the city, one of those newer developments that still had patches of undeveloped land nearby. One night, I was in her living room when the power cut out. Total blackness, no thunderstorm, no warning. Just gone. I lit some candles, figured it was a blown fuse. While I looked around, I heard a faint hum, like a low engine coming from outside. Then I saw it, a red blinking light just barely visible through the back window. In the trees. I froze. I didn't go outside. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there until morning watching that blinking light. By dawn, it was gone. I told myself it was a coincidence. A drone. A toy. Something explainable. A week later, I found a note slipped under the door of my apartment. Just 3 words. You heard him. No return address. No signature. Nothing else. Since then, every few months, I get a call. Always from an unknown number. Always silence on the other end. But I can hear breathing. Sometimes I think I hear that same voice. The boy, just before it clicks off. I don't know who they are or what they're doing. But I think they're still watching. And I think I was never supposed to hear that call. Maybe that's why they let him make it. To see who would listen. And now they know I did. I used to love working night shifts at the 24-hour gas station on Route 6. It was quiet. Peaceful, even. Most nights were uneventful. Just a few truckers or locals passing through for smokes or coffee. It gave me time to read, to think. But after what happened last week, I can't even drive past that place without feeling my stomach twist. It was just after 2 a.m. when the phone rang. The landline never rang. Not once in the 2 years I'd worked there. I picked it up, a little startled. There was no greeting, just static and a faint, raspy breathing on the other end. I waited, thinking maybe it was a prank, but then a voice whispered, "He's here." That was it. Then the line went dead. I stood there for a few seconds, the receiver still pressed to my ear, trying to shake the feeling crawling up my spine. I stepped out from behind the counter and glanced out the windows. Empty lot. No headlights, no movement. I locked the front door anyway. Not 15 minutes later, I noticed a man walking along the edge of the lot, just outside the glow of the streetlights. He wasn't heading toward the store. He was just pacing back and forth, like he was waiting for something or someone. He stopped occasionally to glance toward the building, but every time I tried to meet his eyes, he looked away. I turned on all the outdoor lights. I wanted him to know I saw him, that I was watching. Then he disappeared, not walked off, disappeared. I checked the cameras, rewound the footage. He was there one frame, gone the next. No transition, no blur from movement. Just gone. I sat behind the counter after that, keeping my eyes on the lot through the window. I didn't even notice the smell until it got strong enough to make my eyes water. It was like rotting meat mixed with something sweet and chemical, like syrup and bleach. I followed it to the bathroom in the back. The door was cracked open. It had been locked all night. I pushed it open slowly. Nothing looked out of place. But the smell was stronger in there, overwhelming. I checked the stalls, even climbed onto the toilet to peek over the locked one. Empty. But the smell, it wasn't natural. As I turned to leave, I saw it in the mirror. A figure standing behind me. Close enough that I should have felt it breathing on my neck. I spun around. No one there. The door slammed shut by itself. I couldn't breathe. I yanked it open and stumbled back to the front, hands shaking, heart pounding in my throat. The lot outside was no longer empty. There were 5 people standing in a semicircle around the pumps, all of them facing the store, all of them completely still. I hit the emergency call button under the register and tried to call the cops, but the line was dead. My cell had no service. The screens on the security cameras began to flicker, then cut to static. One of the figures stepped forward, The others followed. They moved slowly, in perfect unison, as if tethered to one mind. I backed away from the counter. Every instinct in me said to run, to hide, to get out. But I was frozen. Their faces came into view as they reached the windows. Pale, blank. No expressions, just milky white eyes and mouths stitched shut with what looked like wire. Then they stopped. They didn't try to come in. They just stood there, staring through the glass. Something began scratching on the roof above me, fast, desperate, like claws on metal. I bolted for the back door and yanked it open, only to find pitch blackness where the alley should have been. No dumpsters, no walls. Just void. Like the station was no longer part of the world. I slammed the door shut and locked it. When I turned around, every single screen on the lottery machines and cash register flashed the same message over and over. Let him in, let him in, let him in. The front door was wide open. I hadn't unlocked it. The figures were gone. Just one person stood in the doorway now. The same man from earlier. He was grinning, but it didn't reach his eyes. They were completely black, like ink had been poured into his skull. He didn't step in. He just whispered something I couldn't hear, then slowly raised his hand and pointed behind me. I turned, and whatever I saw, I've tried to forget it, tried to explain it away as a dream, a hallucination, anything. But I remember every detail, the impossibly long limbs, the skin stretched too tight, the gaping mouth filled with teeth that kept moving, like they were chewing without food. It reached for me. Then, I woke up in the break room. The sun was up. The station was empty. Everything looked normal, like nothing had happened, except the front door was still open. And on the counter, right where I usually keep my keys, was a single item that hadn't been there before. A silver sewing needle, threaded with black wire. Last October, I went camping up in the Chattahoochee National Forest in northern Georgia. It was supposed to be a weekend to unwind. No phone, no noise, just me and the trees. I picked a backcountry trail, one that barely showed up on the maps, and hiked in about 8 miles before setting up camp near an old creek bed. The forest was still and cool, the kind of silence you can only get deep in the woods. The first night was peaceful. I cooked a simple dinner, listened to the frogs croaking by the water, and fell asleep to the soft rustle of leaves above my tent. It was what I'd come for. But the second night was different. It started with a noise. Not loud, but persistent. A soft clicking sound, like 2 stones tapping together. At first, I thought it was just some small animal rooting around, maybe a raccoon or a possum, so I ignored it and rolled over. But then it didn't stop. It got closer. The clicking turned into something more complex. A rhythm, like a deliberate pattern. Click, 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 click. I sat up in my sleeping bag, heart starting to pound, and listened. The noise was just outside my tent now. Still faint, but definitely there. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the door slowly, trying not to make a sound. I shined the beam around the campsite, expecting to see a deer or even a bear. But there was nothing. The light didn't catch any eye shine, no movement in the brush, no signs of life. Just that rhythm. Click, 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 coming from the darkness beyond the trees. I stepped out barefoot into the cold dirt, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. But the moment I did, it stopped, like it knew I was listening. I waited a minute, 2. Nothing. Eventually, I told myself it was just my imagination and crawled back into the tent. But I didn't sleep well. Every gust of wind, every creak of the trees set me on edge. I finally drifted off just before dawn. The next day, I considered hiking out, but I felt silly. It was just a noise, Probably some nocturnal animal I didn't recognize. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That evening, as I gathered wood for my fire, I found something strange wedged between the rocks near the creek. It was a small figure, about the size of my palm, made from twigs and what looked like animal fur tied together with some kind of sinew. It looked vaguely human. And old, like it had been sitting out there for years. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it for a while before backing away and pretending I hadn't seen it. I left the fire burning long after I crawled into my sleeping bag that night. I didn't want to be in the dark again. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up to the clicking sound again. This time it was louder, closer, and it wasn't alone. There were multiple sets of the same rhythm, coming from different directions. Click, 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 click. Then again from behind me, then to my left. I felt surrounded. I didn't dare unzip the tent. I just laid there, frozen, trying to control my breathing. The sounds moved in a slow circle around me, sometimes pausing, sometimes overlapping. It was like a language, one I didn't understand but knew wasn't meant to be comforting. Then a shadow moved across the tent wall. Something tall, too tall. It passed in front of the firelight just for a second, but long enough to make my stomach drop. I didn't hear footsteps, just the clicking. Louder now, aggressive, and then it stopped. Complete silence. I stayed awake the rest of the night, clutching my knife with white knuckles, barely blinking. When the sun finally broke through the trees, I burst out of the tent and packed everything in under 10 minutes. I didn't eat. I didn't even fill my water. I just left. The hike back should have taken a few hours. I did it in less than 2. I ran most of the way, heart hammering in my ears. I only stopped once when I passed by the spot where I'd found the little twig figure. It was gone. There was no sign it had ever been there. Just a flat, empty patch of dirt between the rocks. But on the tree nearby, about eye level, someone, or something, had carved a symbol. A circle with 3 vertical slashes beneath it. It was fresh, not old or worn, like it had been done overnight. I didn't stop to study it. I kept running until I reached my car, threw everything in the back, and drove until I was out of the forest completely. I didn't even look back. I made it home late that night and slept with the lights on for the first time in over a decade. In the days that followed, I tried to look up anything I could: forest legends, cryptids, native folklore. I even called the ranger station and asked about strange sightings in the area. They told me nothing unusual had been reported, that it was probably just forest sounds I wasn't used to. But I was used to the forest. I've spent years hiking, camping, sleeping under the stars. I know what animals sound like. I know what the forest feels like when it's calm, and when it's not. I haven't been back since. My gear's still sitting in my closet, untouched. I still go outside, still walk the trails around town, but I don't camp anymore. I don't go deep into the woods, not alone. And every once in a while, late at night, when the world is still and quiet and I'm lying in bed, I hear it again. Click, 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 like something remembering, something waiting. It was the fall of 2006 when my brother Josh and I went out to visit our uncle's cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He hadn't used the place in years and told us we could crash there for the weekend just to get away. We were both in college at the time, burned out, tired of dorm life and campus noise, so a quiet weekend in the woods sounded like heaven. The drive up was long, and by the time we pulled onto the narrow gravel road that led to the cabin, the sun was already starting to dip behind the trees. It was one of those chilly autumn evenings where the light turns copper and every sound carries farther than it should. The road wound deeper and deeper into the forest, and for a while neither of us said anything. We just watched the trees blur past, that weird stillness settling over us like fog. The cabin itself was small, one floor, a sagging porch, and wood paneling gone gray with age. But it was solid, and we were grateful for it. Inside was musty, but clean enough. A couple of dusty chairs, a wood stove, 2 narrow cots, and a bookshelf filled with old paperbacks and trail maps. No electricity, no cell service, just oil lamps and a little battery-powered radio. That first night, we built a fire in the pit out back, cooked some hot dogs, and drank cheap beer until the fire died down. We talked about classes, girls, life after college, the usual. But I noticed something that night. Every now and then, Josh would glance out into the trees, like he was hearing something. I asked him once, but he just shook his head and said, "It's nothing. Probably a deer or something." But he kept doing it, kept going quiet mid-sentence and just listening. The next morning, we set out on a hike. My uncle had told us about an old trail behind the cabin, unmarked, barely used, that ran out to a lake about 3 miles in. Said it used to be popular back in the 80s before the Park Service stopped maintaining it. We found the path easy enough, hidden behind a cluster of birch trees, and started walking. The woods back there were dense, old growth. It was beautiful but quiet in a way that made your skin prickle. Even the birds seemed to avoid it. The deeper we went, the darker it got, the branches thick above us like a ceiling. About an hour in, we came across this tree, just one, off to the right. A huge pine twisted at the base like it had grown in a spiral. It was strange, but not supernatural. Just odd. Josh stopped in front of it and said, "This is wrong." I asked him what he meant, and he just shrugged. "I don't know. I just don't like this." We kept going. Maybe 20 minutes later, we hit the lake. Small, round, dead still. The water looked black even in daylight, like it didn't reflect anything. We sat for a while, ate some granola bars, but Josh never relaxed. He just sat there on a rock, staring across the lake at the trees. Then he asked, "Do you feel like we're being watched?" I laughed at first, thought he was just messing with me, but he wasn't smiling. I looked around, listening. Nothing. Not even the wind. Just stillness. And that's when I felt it too. This pressure, like eyes pressing into the back of my neck. I tried to shake it off, told him we should head back before it got dark. We walked fast on the way back. Too fast, really, like we were trying to outrun something we couldn't see. The trail felt different, like it was shifting beneath our feet. Trees that hadn't been there before seemed to crowd the path, and I had this rising fear that we'd taken a wrong turn, even though I knew we hadn't. Then Josh stopped again, dead in his tracks, and he pointed. There was something hanging from a low branch. At first, I thought it was just moss, maybe a torn piece of fabric, but as we got closer, I saw what it really was. A rabbit, but not like any rabbit I'd ever seen. It was skinned completely, hairless, bloodless, just pale, raw meat. And it was hanging from the branch by its back legs, tied up with something that looked like vine, but moved like it was still alive, twitching. Neither of us spoke. We just stood there staring at it, this horrible thing gently swaying in the breeze that hadn't been there moments ago. Then we heard it, a branch snapping, not far off, followed by another, closer. Josh grabbed my arm and said, "We're not alone." We didn't run, not at first. We walked fast, heads on a swivel, the trail suddenly unfamiliar in every direction. Then we heard the crunch again, closer, and that's when we broke into a full sprint. Branches whipped our arms, brambles tore at our legs, but we didn't stop. It felt like the woods were closing in. Finally, we burst out onto the gravel road behind the cabin. I didn't even look back. I just ran up the porch steps, threw the door open, and slammed it shut behind us. We stayed in the cabin for the rest of the day, curtains drawn, barely speaking. Josh kept looking out the window. He didn't say what he saw, or if he saw anything, but his face got paler with every hour. That night, we didn't sleep. Around midnight, we heard something move outside. Not footsteps, not an animal, just movement, like something dragging itself slowly around the perimeter of the cabin. Once, twice, 3 times. We didn't move. We just sat there in the dark, holding our breath. Then, silence. The next morning, we packed our things and left without eating. We didn't talk about the rabbit, or the tree, or the feeling of being watched. Weeks went by, then months. We tried to put it behind us. But about a year later, Josh called me one night, voice shaking. He said he'd gone for a walk in the woods near his apartment. Just a quick stroll after work, and he saw it again. That same twisted pine tree, miles from where we'd been. He swore it was the same one, same spiral, same warped base, like it had followed him. He asked me if I'd ever felt like something had come back with us, something from those woods. I told him no, but I lied, because sometimes, late at night, I'll hear it too. That dragging sound, just outside my window. And I'll see in the corner of my eye something move that shouldn't be there. Something that knows I saw it, that we both did, and maybe it's just waiting, watching, until we go back. I met Megan in college. We were both in the same psychology class, and at first we just shared notes and made jokes during lectures. Over time, we grew closer. She was different, introspective, quiet, but with this strange edge to her. Like her mind was always somewhere else. I liked it. We started dating after a few months. Things were good at first. We went out, stayed in, made dinner together, laughed a lot. But there were little things I started noticing. Things I didn't want to admit were odd. Like how she always double-locked her bedroom door, even when she lived alone. Or how she had this rule that she wouldn't answer the door after 11 p.m., no matter what. Once, I joked about it, asked if she was afraid of vampires or something, and she got serious, almost angry. She just said, "Don't open the door, ever, not after 11. I let it go. People have their quirks, but it kept getting stranger. One night, I stayed over at her place. We were asleep when I woke up to this soft knocking. I glanced at my phone. It was 1:17 a.m. I figured it was a neighbor or maybe someone drunk, knocking on the wrong door. But Megan was already sitting up in bed, completely still, staring at the bedroom door. "Don't move," she whispered. "Don't make a sound." The knocking kept going, steady and soft. Then it stopped. A few seconds passed and something scraped against the front door, like fingers dragging slowly across wood. I wanted to get up, to check it out, but Megan grabbed my arm so tight it hurt. Then the doorknob rattled, just once, gently. We sat in silence for what felt like forever. Eventually, it went away. Megan didn't say anything. She just lay back down, turned away from me, and pretended to sleep. I did the same. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened, made coffee, kissed me goodbye, told me to have a good day. I tried to bring it up, but she just said I must have dreamed it, that she didn't hear anything. I knew she was lying. I didn't stay over much after that, and when I did, I made sure to be asleep before 11. But that rule she had, it started to haunt me. A few weeks later, Megan stopped responding to my texts. She didn't show up to class. wouldn't answer the door when I went to her place. Eventually, I got a text from her, just one. "Don't come here, don't try to find me, I'm safe. Please just forget me." And that was it. I didn't forget her. I couldn't. I checked her socials, nothing new. Called her friends, no one had seen her. It was like she'd just disappeared. Vanished. A few days later, I went back to her apartment. I know I shouldn't have. I knocked. No answer. I waited. Nothing. So I did something stupid. I picked the lock. I'd seen her do it once when she forgot her keys. I remembered how she used a card to pop the door open. It took me a few tries, but eventually I got in. The place was empty, like completely. No furniture, no dishes, no clothes, nothing. Like no one had lived there at all. But the weirdest thing? The double locks were still there, and the inside of the front door had deep scratch marks, like something had clawed at it from the outside, or the inside, I couldn't tell. I should have left. I know that now. But I went into the bedroom. It was bare except for one thing, a sheet of paper on the floor. It had one sentence written in red ink. "Don't open the door after 11. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it all over and over in my head. The knock, the rule, the message. I felt like I was losing my mind. Then, at exactly 11:08 p.m., someone knocked on my door. Software, steady, just like that night. I froze. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a secured building. No one could have gotten up without a key or code. The knocking continued. I backed away from the door, grabbed my phone, and texted Megan, even though I hadn't heard from her in weeks. "Someone's at my door. It's 11:08. What do I do?" No reply. I called, straight to voicemail. Then a second knock, and a third. Then nothing. I waited in the dark, heart pounding, until sunrise. I didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't leave the apartment the next day. That night, it happened again. 11:06 this time. The same soft knock. Over and over. I didn't answer. The next night, the knocking came at 11:04. Then 11:01. It's been happening every night since, a few minutes earlier each time. Tonight it started at 10:52. I don't know what happens if I answer it. I don't want to know, but I can feel it getting closer. Soon it'll knock before the sun sets. Soon it won't need permission to come in. And I think Megan knew. Wherever she is, I think she ran out of time, and I think I'm next. When I was 24, I rented a basement apartment in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Pittsburgh. I had just started a new job and was looking for something cheap and simple. Nothing fancy, just a roof over my head. The apartment was below a modest 2-story home owned by a woman in her late 60s named Mrs. Koenig. She lived alone and seemed harmless enough, quiet, polite, a little odd in that old lady kind of way. The rent was ridiculously low, which should have been a red flag, but I was young and broke and didn't ask too many questions. The basement had been converted into a small unit with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a single bedroom. It had no windows, which bothered me at first, but I told myself it was just temporary. The first week or so went by without any issues. Mrs. Koenig mostly kept to herself, and I rarely saw her unless I needed something fixed. One day, about 2 weeks in, I was walking up the steps to grab my mail when I noticed her standing at the top, just kind of watching me. She smiled, but it didn't feel warm. More like she was studying me, like a bug under a microscope. "You sleep well down there?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, it's quiet." She kept smiling. "No bad dreams?" "No." "Strange noises?" That threw me off. I laughed a little, thinking maybe she was joking. "No, nothing like that." She nodded slowly, almost like she didn't believe me. Then she turned and went back inside. That night I started hearing things, not loud or obvious, just faint noises, scraping sounds like something being dragged slowly across concrete, a dull tapping, irregular and distant. I told myself it was just the house settling, or maybe the plumbing. Old houses make noise. It was nothing. But the next night it got worse. I was lying in bed when I heard what sounded like whispering. So quiet I couldn't make out the words, but I was sure it was whispering. I got up, turned on every light, checked the bathroom, the closet. Nothing. But when I turned off the lights again, the whispering returned. And this time it was closer. I barely slept that night. The next morning I confronted Mrs. Koenig. "I think your house might be haunted," I joked, trying to keep things light. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me and said, "Some things linger, especially underground." I didn't know how to respond to that. She didn't explain, just closed the door in my face. That day I went to work, exhausted, jumpy, and anxious. My coworker, Jenna, noticed and asked if I was okay. I told her about the weird noises and Mrs. Koenig's strange behavior. Jenna frowned and said, "You know, my cousin used to live in that neighborhood. She said something happened there a long time ago. Some guy disappeared. They never found him." I asked her for more details, but she didn't know much. Just rumors. That night, I decided to record the sounds. I set up my phone with a voice memo app and left it recording while I tried to sleep. The whispering came back, even louder than before. I thought I could almost make out the words, but every time I tried to focus, they slipped away, like they were being spoken just beyond the edge of understanding. When I listened to the recording the next morning, my blood went cold. There were voices, clearer than I'd heard them in real time. Male voices. One of them was crying, pleading. "Let me out," he said. "I didn't do anything." Another voice responded, calm and cold. "You don't leave until I say." There was a sound, something metallic scraping, followed by what I swear were fingernails against concrete. I took the recording to the police. They didn't care, said it was probably a prank or a podcast I left playing by mistake. But I knew what I'd heard. I went home and decided to search the basement. I pulled up the rug near the bed, checked the corners of the room, knocked on the walls. When I knocked on the wall near the back of the bathroom, it sounded different, hollow. I pushed on it. Nothing. I grabbed a hammer and started hitting it. It took a few minutes, but eventually a piece of the drywall gave way, revealing a narrow, bricked-up doorway behind it. The bricks looked newer than the rest of the wall, like someone had sealed it recently. My heart was pounding. I should have stopped there. I should have called someone. But I didn't. I spent the next hour chipping away at the bricks. Eventually, I broke through. Behind the wall was a small, pitch-black room. It stank, rotting meat, mold, damp earth. I shone my flashlight inside and immediately gagged. There were bones, dozens of them, and chains bolted into the wall. Human bones. I stumbled back, almost threw up, ran upstairs and pounded on Mrs. Koenig's door. She didn't answer. I called the cops again, and this time they took me seriously. They found her in her bedroom, sitting calmly in a rocking chair. She didn't resist arrest, didn't say a word, just stared straight ahead like she was already somewhere else. They excavated the basement and found the remains of 3 different men. All of them had gone missing between 1984 and 1991. All of them had lived in that basement apartment. I moved out the same day, never went back. I still have the recording. I don't listen to it anymore, but sometimes when I can't sleep, I remember the voice, the one that wasn't crying, the one that said, "You don't leave until I say." And I wonder how many more voices are still down there, whispering through the walls. waiting.